Tim Petrowich here for Dateline Marion, and we're speaking with Marion head football coach Kerry Martin. And Coach, we get to do a Week 11 show. It's only happened a few times since we started doing this, but pretty exciting because the Wildcats were 29-12 winners over Rich East on Saturday. And talk a little bit about that game from an overall standpoint, which we don't do a lot, but it just was a pretty solid performance by the Wildcats all around.
We felt that way. We felt like it was maybe our most complete game as far as putting everything together and the kids executing the game plan and playing with a lot of enthusiasm and energy and just executing in key situations. We've talked about the need for some big plays, and we got that on Saturday. And just a kind of game that really you're proud of your kids, you're proud of your coaches because they did such a good job of putting together a plan, and it was carried out really, really well. And we beat a good football team. And I think my brother may have been the one that told me it's holding them to, I think, their lowest point total of the year maybe, and we also scored the second most points against them all year. So considering how much we respect their conference, that's a pretty good task.
You talked about energy last week and about needing to get energy, and you talked about it again on Saturday after the game. And think about that for a little bit, because you were kind of hamstrung atmosphere-wise because the band had a competition. They weren't there. A lot of the people that are normally there to help provide that energy and atmosphere weren't there. Another big event going on with the president just a few miles away. But the kids really kind of took it upon themselves, the team, to create that energy and sustain it.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's a good observation. I think sometimes we talked about that in practice. We worked last week on creating some energy in practice and some enthusiasm. And if you can do that at practice when the stadium's empty, it makes it a whole lot easier when you've got a good home playoff crowd. And no, it wasn't the size crowd we get on a Friday night with all the festivities involved, but sometimes playoff football on Saturday afternoons, there's a lot of conflicts because Friday night seems to be singularly designed for high school football. And then Saturday is a lot of times people have already planned band competitions and other activities. And so your Saturday playoff games sometimes can run into a lot of conflicts, and we did this week, and I was still love the enthusiasm of our crowd. I think our kids really woke our crowd up early in the ball game and got them going, and then they really fed off that. But yeah, we created some energy in practice all week, and I think the kids came out from the first play of the game and created some of their own energy, and I think at the stadium and the fans really kicked it in.
We talked last week about their running game. They like to run, and they run from all different angles. And so when you were able to come out and stop that running game on the first possession, you talked Saturday about how important it was that their first possession, they went for it on fourth down because they had that confidence in their running game, and you were able to make that stop.
We preached all week, and I guess this is a bit of a roll of the dice, how big the first possession was going to be, or even the first series of downs. You run the risk of saying that, and the first series they drive the ball down the field, and you go, we kind of put a lot of eggs in that first basket. Mm-hmm. But we really did. We felt like we didn't have to stop them on the first series, but we had to show them we were there to take this on and kind of knuckle down in the trenches and get after it. And so I was just thrilled with that first series, the way our kids fought, held them to a 4th and 2, thought they might punt it. They went for it. In their offense, a 2-yard gain is almost a given. And our kids got a big stop, gave us the ball, and then offensively we did something with it and got off to a good fast start. So it was we talk about scenarios you want to start with. Dating back to week 1, Rochelle got the most perfect scenario to start the game.
Right.
And it really put us on our heels early. I felt like that was the best start we could have asked for.
Another thing that was talked about was that they wanted to limit your possessions by controlling the ball with their running game because, I'm sure they knew Marion was a high-powered offense. You knew they were a grinded-out running game type of an offense. And after a 14-12 halftime, it struck me as kind of unique or different that they were the ones that had just 3 possessions in the second half. I went back and looked. They ran 14 second-half offensive plays. And one of those, that twice they turned the ball over on downs, and once they threw an interception. But They ran 14 plays in the second half, and your offense was the one that stayed on the field and controlled the game.
It is ironic, and I think when we got into our tight set later on in the game, which we often go to at some point in time in the game anyway, and our kids did a nice job. I think we had the ball at the 20-yard line, and we had to change the field position if nothing else. We were worried about giving up the ball down deep, and so we put together a nice drive, and then we got past the 50-yard line. That drive stalled. And we eventually had to give the ball up, but that drive used up clock, and that drive changed the field position dramatically. And what it did was it put them in a longer drive situation with less time on the clock. And then I noticed their game plan had to change to, well, we can't grind it out for 7 minutes and score. They're going to have to try to score quicker, and that's not what they do. And so the ultimate goal was to make them throw the ball at some point, get ahead, get a lead. But the fact that we were able to drive the ball and use up the clock and make the clock their enemy was an added bonus, and it really, really helped us.
So let's go back then to your final touchdown of the game, where you made the decision to go for a 2-point conversion instead of one. And what that did was it created it to turn into a 3-possession game instead of a 2-possession game.
That's why we did it. We wanted to put them in a situation where they had to score as many times possible, and hopefully, being the grinded out offense that they were, that we could maybe demoralize them, but that's a bad word, but maybe just deflate them a little bit to where they looked up and said, this is going to be a really tough task. And I think, I've been in that situation where it just looks insurmountable, and I don't know if it worked or not, but certainly I think it psychologically, if you can make them say, hey, to themselves, hey, we got to score 3 times to win, and there's 6 or 7 minutes left in the game, that's a tall task for a spread team. But for a team that's not accustomed to spreading the ball, I think it was a tough situation. Our kids did a great job of finishing the game. We talked about watching film yesterday. The word finish was on the screen a lot when we labeled the plays, and we finished at key times. We finished on extra points, short yardage touchdowns, 4th down and 1 or 2. We finished a lot of drives and finished a lot of series really well.
Some big plays again, something that you take as a surprise and maybe gravy on top of the mashed potatoes, so to speak. But right there on that first drive, the long pass to Frankie that got you down to the 1. And then I don't know how much more wide open Vincent Newsom could have been on that touchdown pass.
Yeah, we crossed receivers up hoping that they would maybe miss somebody, and two defenders took one route and left one defender wide open. That was Vince. And we talked to him in the hallway today, and we talked about that ball hanging up in the air. When you're that wide open, it's like that ball's
it takes forever, doesn't it?
That ball's never going to come down. So, but great to see him get involved like that as just a freshman. And I felt like the throw to Frankie Horner was just a great throw. And then my favorite throw of the day was the throw to Jake Welch on 3rd and long, and we needed a first down to keep a drive going. And Boston threw a ball to the outside shoulder on our sideline. It was just a perfect throw. I don't say that word very often, but it was special. So a lot of big plays in this game, a lot of big moments. I felt offensively and defensively, and so it was a good effort.
A couple of defensive plays that stood out. One was the interception late by Dylan, but the one I pointed at after the game was they had a 4th down situation. I think it was 4th and 2, and they tried a little quick pass over the middle, and it seemed like Drake Gravatt knew that play was there because he just stepped right in front and knocked it down.
He sure did. That was a big play by Drake. And I'll tell you another play is they try to trick play. They try to roll out to our sideline, and they try to throw back. And Logan Phillips had stayed home on the backside, which he's coached.
Oh, and then tackled it for a big loss.
Made a tackle for a big loss, and those are those moments where the defensive discipline and doing what you're coached to do, and those things that Logan Phillips is synonymous with, was really big for us. And that was a huge play because those trick plays can often be game changers and momentum changers, and boy, to snuff that out and to take care of it was a big moment. So you're right, there were some big plays on defense, and those just kind of stood out.
I have to ask, is there going to be a time soon where James Gunn actually lines up as a running back and takes a handoff?
That's the most asked question I get since the game. How come James doesn't run the ball more? I mean, I don't know how many yards he's got on average, but 2 carries, and at least 15 yards of carry,
something like that. Yeah, he's close.
I mean, yeah, who wouldn't give him the ball more? So I don't know, but we'll have to think about that seriously, because
that could be a big weapon in short yardage situations.
He can move the pile now. I'm telling you, he can move the pile. So certainly there's a thought process that goes into that. But he, as I said before, he's a really good athlete. He isn't just a big guy. And back in my day, guys that big were just big guys that played the line and shoved people around. But he can run. You saw him on defense all day making tackles behind the line of scrimmage.
Oh, yeah.
He tackled ball carriers from behind, and what a great season he's having.
Well, and I think that there might have been 11 people or 15 people in the stadium that knew he was going to get the ball in that play too.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's been good to us, and you just, we've put that in for him. He's quick off the ball. He has really good hands, and kind of nice to see him get involved on the ball carrying side of things.
So we shift gears now. We head to the Week 11 opponent, and it's one that a lot of people across the state know, synonymous with 5A, 6A football, and that's Joliet Catholic. And it's not the same Joliet Catholic team that has been over the years. In fact, they went, I think, on a 3-year playoff drought, and this is their first year back in. But pretty impressive with a big win over Metamora.
Yeah, they're a really, really good football team, of course, and their 5-4 record's deceiving because they play in the toughest, if not one of the toughest conferences in the state, and it's an all Catholic school conference where every week is a battle, and so you can go 3-6 or 2-7 and be a really good football team in that conference. So their 5-4 comes with certainly a lot of credibility to it. They're a very strong football team. They're a very well coached football team, disciplined. They tackle well, and the running backs are really special. So that's what I think in a nutshell. What I think of them, they are just fundamentally sound. You can tell they're well coached, and they're hard to get out of position. And then the running backs, both of them are really good. And when you rush for 1,800 yards against the defenses they've seen, you've got a really talented young man there and a good line up front. So that's going to be an exceptional challenge for us. But, it's great to have that momentum from Saturday, the way we played on defense, holding that team to its lowest point total of the year, and then being able to kind of ride that into this Joliet Catholic game.
One of the things I noticed is that they've kind of had some games where it seemed like they weren't there. I mean, some of their losses were blowout losses, and then they turn around and beat some good teams by significant numbers. So there may be, maybe there's an issue of consistency there possibly.
We want that inconsistency to be on our favor. So it would certainly help, and I think we've talked all year about being consistent and how important that is to not fluctuate week in and week out and quarter by quarter, and our kids, I think, have gotten more consistent as the season's progressed, and I thought Saturday was kind of a strong culmination of all those phases coming together and playing well. But certainly we used the word elevate all last week about making the playoffs and elevating your game, and certainly with every step of the playoffs we got to elevate again, and so we fought to eliminate that inconsistency, because you don't want to be that team that's one way one week and one way the next. So I don't know if their inconsistency is due to their opponents or due to some of their fault or a combination of both. But, certainly when you play in a playoff game, it is about how you play. But it's also what kind of game is your opponent giving you? Are they at their best? Are they making mistakes? So we'll just have to wait and see and take care of our side of it.
You've had opportunity to coach in some games against some well-known, the 2 years against Metamora, Sacred Hearts Griffin, some things like that. So there's things ways you've approached games like this before against a team that, the program has a big name, and every team is different. So that's one of the things you have to look at too.
You do, and you have to make sure your players don't get caught up in the program's history. They focus on the team this season, because when you pull up to Morris, when we pulled up to Morris 2 years ago for the playoffs, they had on their press box all their championships, runner-ups, quarterfinals, and that can be pretty daunting if you allow that to add points on the scoreboard before the game starts, because they can. I mean, you can look at that and say, wow, these guys know how to win, and I'm sure there is carryover within a good program, and there's carryover in our program to playing in big games and conference games and play up. But I think you just can't let that get ahead of you and think, well, they've won this many state titles, that means this team is a state title team. They may be, but you got to make them prove it. And I think we just can't let the history of Joliet Catholic Academy, affect the way we approach the ball game. I think our kids have done a real good job so far this week of just focusing on who they are in 2018.
So it's a straight shot up the interstate, a little less than 5 hours. It's not an unusual trip for the Wildcats?
Not really. When you think about Haywood County and Galesburg and Dunlap and Morris and Rich Central, that's just off the top of my head. Sacred Heart is 3+. It's not like something we haven't done before. We've made these trips before, and it's a day. It'll wipe out your day from the time you leave to play to coming home. But no better way to spend it than Wildcat football, man, this time of year. So we're excited to be playing Week 11, and there's 16 teams in 5A left, and we're excited for the opportunity.
So injury-wise, any changes from last week?
We just have some minor things. I don't think anything is serious. We just have the two young men that were hurt early in the year, and so we think that we expect to be at full strength on Saturday.
And any shout-outs?
Boy, you caught me off guard.
You threw that first one out, so I just want to make sure we don't miss any.
Shout-outs this week. I'll just give a shout-out to my athletic director, Ryan Gadiski.
There you go.
He been great all year, and Tiffany, the athletic secretary, wow, just two great people to work with every single day, taking care of our program, helping us with all the logistics that go into traveling the way we do, and the scheduling that he's worked so hard to get us a really good football schedule as best he can in our situation. And Tiffany just does everything. Just amazing job in that office. And so Tiffany and Ryan are a big part of our football family and our football success, because it isn't just what happens on the field. There's so many people behind the scenes that I think are making things happen that help us focus on just the X's and O part of it. So that's our shout out.
One last question I got to know, because you're playing on turf on Saturday. Is it white on white?
It is white on white.
That's very good.
You like that?
Yeah, I do like that.
Yeah, white
on white. All right. Yep. Saturday, 5 p.m. in Joliet at Joliet Memorial Stadium. The Wildcats take on Joliet Catholic, round 2 of the IHSA Class 5A playoffs. That's Marion head football coach Kerry Martin. For Dateline Marion, I'm Tim Petrowich.